Norsca. These barbaric tribes have no respect for the sanctity of life, whether it be human, elf, or even their own kind. They revel in their bloodthirsty hunts and savage rituals, all while ignoring the bigger picture and the needs of the wider world. Then there are their so-called gods. These mad entities they worship are nothing more than twisted abominations, demanding the sacrifice of innocent lives for their own twisted pleasure. It is a disgrace that any sentient being would bow down before such twisted fiends. But perhaps the most infuriating thing about the tribes is their arrogance. They think that their raw power and ferocity make them invincible, but they couldn't be more wrong. In the face of a united front of the civilized races, they have crumbled time and again like the pathetic savages they are. Norsca is a blight on this world, a scourge that must be eradicated for the rest of the world to live.
Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign overview guide for Norsca in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, before I talk about Wulfrik and about Throgg, I do want to talk a bit about Norsca. Now, I've talked about Norsca in some other videos. Suffice to say that they do have issues in their campaigns at the moment. One of the problems is that their baseline economy, with the exception of ports, which do generate a lot of income, but their regular economy just generates very, very little money. Though the structures themselves can be fairly cheap. But there are, of course, going to be plenty of downsides when you're dealing with Norsca. You also don't have walls on your settlements in Norsca itself. So, actually, fighting as Norsca can be difficult because you've got this wide swath of territory to defend, and it's actually very easy to gain control over all of Norsca during the course of a campaign. That isn't necessarily, however, a benefit during the course of a campaign. Let me explain why that is. So, let's say I go over here. I have to resolve this battle, right? I do lose one unit of Marauder horsemen right there. This is on legendary. And when you fight the faction leader of another Norscan faction, you get the ability to force a confederation, which will give you control over their territory. All well and good. The problem is, your relations with the other Norscan factions is not necessarily going to be great, because there is a level of aversion inherent between the Norscan factions. So that means it's very easy playing as the Norscans to end up at war with the other with your fellow Norscans, and when you face their faction leaders, the smartest thing to do, of course, would be to take over their territory, unless they have like one region or two regions, something like that. Like even that faction I just started at war with, it might have actually been better to refuse that confederation and just take it by force, because then I would have had another battle. I would have gotten some opportunities, but then I would have had to come down all the way to the down the mountain there to take that territory. So it's probably a better choice, but even so when it comes to it. So you gain all of Norsca very quickly, which means you have to defend it, which can be a major problem because a lot of the factions that do surround you don't like you. Like the north should be relatively secured, though not necessarily so, but the south certainly won't be. So you'll be running around trying to put down fires during the course of the campaign, and it's not like your units are cheap to recruit either. I mean, regular marauders are, but regular marauders are worthless units. You never should bother to recruit them. Instead, what you want to do during the course of this campaign, you want to get stuff like marauder berserkers, skin wolves, armored skin wolves ideally, ice wolves, trolls, all that kind of good stuff when it comes to it. But yeah, it can be pretty rough early on. It's certainly one of the rougher starts for any particular race, and there's only two legendary lords, and they start very close to each other. That's Throgg and Wulfrik over here. On top of that, and I'll finish it here, but on top of that, they do have the issue of having to balance between raising a settlement to sacrifice it to God, or sacking it or taking it for the sake of the money, the benefits that it brings. So that's always the tension. It's always, and honestly, it's annoying as hell. And then the monster hunts, which could be fun. It can be fun, but a lot of them are just bugged. The objectives are flat out bugged. It has been an issue since Immortal Empires came out in beta, and it continues to remain an issue. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about the two Legendary Lords and their campaigns. So starting with Wulfrik, he'll start over here by the Monolith, and he'll be able to get Troll Fjord very, very quickly because the faction that controls it at the very start is going to have its faction leader right next to Wulfrik, so you kill him, you confederate him, all well and good. But then the issues do start coming in. Your starting army can be considered decent. You do have Marauder Champions, Marauder Berserkers, a Feral Mammoth. There is a great deal of power. However, you are lacking in casualty replenishment. You don't have the hero choice because you have a Sorcerer as opposed to the casualty replenishment choice of the Femir Bale Fiend, which would give you casualty replenishment. And on top of that, you start with a tier 1 capital, which it doesn't even give you the opportunity to recruit any other units except like regular Marauders or Marauder Spearmen as well. So there's obviously limitations, and you do start a war with two factions. Now, if you can win the battle here against Lamont, you can gain control over this entire territory, and unlike Throgg, you're not unfriendly when it comes to the Varg. Alright, so during the course of this campaign, you can certainly take your time, just take over the Naglfari plains, maybe sneak up on the Varg and take out Surfa X army, especially if it has been weakened. But just bear in mind that the Varg may end up fighting Throgg, and if that happens and they lose, and Throgg is certainly a lot more powerful than they are, then Throgg can gain over this entire province as well, which can be an issue for you. Now, for Wulfrik, your campaign benefits during the course of campaign is that you gain minus 15% upkeep for Marauder units, which is actually a pretty substantial early game benefit, especially because Marauder units can be pretty expensive, so reducing their upkeep, especially for some of the higher end units like the Marauder Champions, it's pretty beneficial. And then plus 15 melee attack for Mammoth units, which, like, the thing about Mammoths, they already have pretty insane stats outside of their armor, right? And when we're looking on the issue of War Mammoths and Feral Mammoths, they have some really insane stats and can do an incredible amount of damage during the course of battle. Like, they can completely wipe out an enemy force very, very easily just because of the sheer amount of damage that they do during the course of that battle. So having more melee attack, it's beneficial, but does it really matter for Mammoths? I wouldn't necessarily say so. He does get a reinforcement range of plus 30%. That's kind of hit or miss, depends on how your campaign is going, how important. It's going to be very, very situational. He does give fear to his entire army, and skill-wise, he gets Sea Fang as an ability from the very start, and then his special skill line, well, we're looking at major debuff on an enemy lord and hero, so he is a good lord and hero killer. He does get improved anti-large ammo for javelin units, a bonus versus large for Marauder Hunters and Marauder Spearmen. And then on top of that, more ability usage for Sea Fang, Gift of Tongues, so Terror, minus 15% upkeep for his army. He does have a War Mammoth mount, which is a substantial amount of power in combat, and construction cost and construction time benefit for provincial capital settlement buildings, as well as casualty replenishment plus 50% for himself. He's kind of selfish in that respect. But he does have quite a bit of power, dueling power. The minus 15% upkeep faction-wide benefit, it's okay, but I'll be honest, I think Wulfrik, out of the two Legendary Lords, he's actually the weaker choice. Not in the sense of him personally, but in terms of his campaign, because he starts with no barracks, he starts with the tier 1 settlement, he starts with a limited province. He does have potential, but you're going to have a really rough early game if you're playing as Wulfrik. And it's not necessarily going to get better in the long game, because having a slow early game means you're going to have a more difficult mid and maybe even potentially late game. So there lies the problem. My advice during the course of this campaign is, yeah, take the Troll Fjord. Fight the battles manually. Don't auto-resolve the battles, because otherwise you're going to take massive amounts of casualties. So you want to fight the battles manually, especially since you don't start with casualty replenishment like Throgg does. And fight battles manually. Spend some, maybe 2 turns, just using global recruitment to get access to quite a few marauders, and then go against the Naglfari Plain to take it over from them. Once you've done that, you do have some choices. I would probably try and sneak up on the Varg, though I would probably also leave the Scalings alone. The reason I leave them alone is if you take over, let's assume you take down their faction leader, right? Well, congrats, you've got now 3 regions to defend against Marienburg and Nordland, as well as other factions that might come in, including Lewin Leon Kerr. That's not necessarily a situation you want to deal with during the course of your campaign, so it's actually probably the best to actually just ally the Scalings and maybe just confederate them regularly through diplomacy. Instead, your better opportunities are, it's better to just go up north, take out Surfa Ek, and then if you can catch him, take out Throgg and gain his territory. Like, just go through Trogg's territory until you find his army and then beat his army in a fight. That said, bear in mind, he does have a very, very substantial army. Alternatively, you could decide to go raid the Empire once you've taken the Naglfari Plain, maybe once you've taken the Varg. Just leave Throgg to his own devices, and Azazel as well. Because Throgg, in general, he'll do a pretty decent job on his own during the course of his campaign. One of the problems he does have is that the Norscan factions to the west tend to declare war on him, or he declares war on them. Though he can also make an alliance with them, but he could decide that the best course of action during your campaign is to kind of just draw the line here, right, between the Bay of Blades and the Varg camp. Like, just take the Varg camp, take the Varg themselves, take their territory. You'll have 3 provinces here in Norsca, and then join the Scalings in assaulting the Empire, taking their ports, sacking their settlements, raising them for the Dark Gods. That might be one of the better benefits of this campaign, instead of trying to fight a campaign where you take over Throgg's territory and you end up fighting both Kislev and the Empire at the same time, or having territory that's exposed to both the Empire and Kislev at the same time. You do have pretty powerful armies, absolutely, and one of the nice things when it comes to Marauder Berserkers is that the more right? So the more they spend in melee, the more powerful they get during the course of battle. When it comes to champion, the champions, they also get more powerful in battle the more they fight. But bear in mind, you're probably going to have to fight a lot of battles with auto resolve here. But that's the basic campaign plan for Wulfrik. Just take the mountains of Naglfar, the Doomkeep, maybe the Varg. I would personally do it, though I would probably bring more better units than just regular Marauders. There are some Marauder horseman recruitment options, and these guys should build a barrack, so you should be able to get Berserkers and then throw all that against Surfa Ek. Take him out, take his territory, before he does something as stupid as declaring war against Throgg. So take out Surfa Ek, take his territory for yourself, and with those 3 provinces, go for Empire or go east. Those are your choices. If you go east, just bear in mind what the consequences of that will be during the course of your campaign. Then we have Throgg, the Troll King. He starts in a much better situation than poor Wulfrik. He does have a campaign benefit of minus 20% upkeep for Norscan Trolls and Norscan Ice Troll units, 15% physical resistance for those troll units as well. Now, this is actually a lot more substantial than it might appear. The reason this is so very substantial is because Norscan Trolls and Norscan Ice Trolls can be some of the most cost-effective units during the course of your campaign. The problem for Norsca comes down to this. A lot of their units, even if like, if they're cheap, like regular Marauders, they're pretty bad. If they're good, like, say, Berserkers, they're not so amazing for the cost that you have to spend to actually get them. So, a Marauder Berserker, before any kind of upkeep benefit, has 188 upkeep. Yes, they're pretty good in a melee fight, but they're also very vulnerable to range power. Whereas the Norscan trolls, and specifically the Norscanized trolls, are far better in every situation. Like in a pure long melee fight, yes, I can see a Norscan. I can see the Berserkers and the Champions be a better choice, but in a rush fight, and most of the time battles will be pretty short, and especially against range units, of which you will face no shortage of during the course of your campaign, because you do have Dwarves, you do have the Empire, you do have Kislev. If you're playing as either Norscan faction, the Norscan Ice Trolls in particular are just going to do a lot better. So having that upkeep benefit and physical resistance benefit is actually far more substantial. On top of that, Throgg does start with a Bale Fiend, so he, from the very start of his campaign, has casualty replenishment via hero. He also starts with the barracks and a tier 2 minor settlement, and he almost gains control. He gains free region of an entire province of 4 regions in the first turn by just killing the leader of the Aceling. Now, that's the really good stuff of his campaign. So he has a powerful army, good campaign benefits, good starting situation in terms of like just being able to get the control of a province very, very quickly. On top of that, he gets control in +1 in a local province. All units are immune to all attrition, and he spreads Chaos Undivided. Furthermore, he can get a leadership benefit, a minus 10% upkeep for Trolls, Finir, and Skinwolves in his army, beyond the 20% upkeep benefit you have faction-wide. Then you get some pretty useful abilities, like Horrible Regeneration for Trolls and Skinwolves in his army, Missile Resistance, so making them even more effective. And Trolls, by the way, are going to be more effective than many of your other units against ranged units, because they'll be able to close the gap faster. They have better armor than many of your other units. So he really does have a lot of benefits for units that are by default superior to many of the Norscan infantry units by default. In fact, with the exception of Berserkers and Champions, when it comes to the Norscan roster, it's really the monsters that win the game, not the foolish humans, really. And even Champions have some significant downsides. That they take too long to recruit, they're too expensive to maintain, and there's just better ways of spending your money during the course of this particular campaign. Though getting Trolls, of course, does require tier 3 barracks when it comes down to it. But Throgg does have quite a few benefits in his campaign that I would argue are quite substantial. What are the issues, though, in this campaign? Well, the Dwarves can put up a pretty good fight against you, so you kind of need to rush to take them out. Here's the problem, though. You might face this situation quite often as Norsca, where because of the stats on your units and the power of your armies, you should be able to out-resolve a lot of the battles. But if you do so, that's going to weaken you in the eyes of your neighbors, so they're going to try and take advantage of that, and Norscan factions don't particularly like one another, nor do Chaos factions in general, actually. Though you have an actual aversion, like, there's actually an aversion mechanic going around when it comes to this of minus 10. Beyond that, though, here's the problem with Throgg's campaign. And it is a pretty major issue. So, you're going to have those battles. That's going to weaken your army. Be it auto-resolve or fighting them manually, you're going to take casualties fighting the dwarves over here in Kraka-Drak. You don't want to wipe them out. That is a pretty good province. It gives you quite a few benefits, and it gives you a foothold going into Kislev. In particular, getting the lair of the Troll King is actually a pretty important aspect in Throgg's campaign. Bit weird that he actually doesn't start there, but that's a different discussion. But here's the issue, right? So Wulfrik, he is going to come over here. He's going to take the mountains very quickly. The Varg hate you. Wulfrik doesn't like you either. So between the casualties that weaken your faction ranking, which makes the AI more likely to attack you. So you almost never want to end up in a campaign situation where you're surrounded by potential factions that can declare war on you and to take significant casualties. You always want to preserve your strength, because if you lose a lot of that strength, it's going to be the death bowl coming for you. And what tends to happen for Throgg in his campaign, the Varg declare war on him, and Wulfrik shortly follows suit. Now, the biggest issue isn't their armies, believe it or not. You actually can beat both of them. But then you end up having this vast swath of territory that you have to deal with. And if you don't help Frot, he's going to lose to Kislev. Azazel will put up a pretty decent fight against Kastalten, but I don't think I've ever seen Azazel beat Kastalten. Nor the other way around, to be quite honest. Very rarely have I seen Kastalten win against Azazel. But really, the thing that's important to understand about the situation in Kislev is that it's Throgg that's the big ace in the hole for Azazel and Frot succeeding against Kislev, because it's Throgg that provides that needed push for them to succeed. If you don't go to fight Kislev, then Frot is gonna lose, Azazel may lose, and your territory here that you want to hold, because the lair of the Troll King is actually a substantial landmark, may be put under threat. Here's the issue on that. Kislev is a nightmare to actually take. I'm not talking about necessarily facing them in a one-on-one fight. It's more so the fact the AI obviously cheats, brings a lot of troops that a normal player wouldn't afford. And the issue is Kislev brings a lot of ranged troops, so their army is actually quite ideally well-suited to dealing with you. But the issue is, the bigger problem beyond just the direct fight against Kislev, which can be an issue in its own right, is the fact you have this swath of territory to take care of as well. That does have enemies to deal with. So that is one of the main issues, and it's Norsca. And this is one of the things that's going to drag Throgg's campaign down. Now, I would say it's a much better campaign to play it than Wulfrik from my perspective. Because while Wulfrik certainly does have his own benefits, it's not like you're going to miss out on his combat power during the course of Throgg's campaign, because you're going to be able to get him pretty damn quickly, actually, during the course of your own campaign. Maybe one of the things to be done during the course of this campaign is just to take out the Acelings, take out the Winter Pyre, and then just ignore the Dwarves and march directly for Surfak and take them out very, very quickly. Because that way, maybe you can make some kind of deal with Wulfrik. Like, the best kind of scenario in this campaign would be to avoid a war with Wulfrik. Let him do his own thing against the Empire, while you focus here in the east. You take down Kislev, you take this territory, you eliminate these factions. By achieving that can be a bit of an issue. Anyway, that's all there is to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. I do apologize for how short some of the more recent videos have been. I've been spending the last half week or so recovering from food poisoning. Fun stuff, and it has affected my voice, it has affected me in general, and it has been an issue actually being able to get any kind of work done. Hopefully I will recover over the next couple of days, but we'll see. Costin signing out.